Welcome to John Redmann, Power of Attorney, the show that aims to empower you through knowledge of the law. I'm attorney John Redmann.
And hello everyone, I'm Shauna Sanford. Well, how many of you out there know what it's like to be harassed by bill collectors after you've gotten behind on a bill payment or payments? It's true that everybody is obligated to pay their debts, but did you know that there are laws which dictate how debt collectors can treat you?
How are you entitled to be treated by debt collectors? What can you do to stop a collector from harassing you? And how can you get back on track to pay your debts? We'll tackle these questions and many more with attorney Jack Jernigan, who handles debtors' rights and debt collection in his private practice.
That's right. In fact, this is such a big topic that we're going to devote two shows to this issue. But before we get to our guests, John, I know that you are a big consumer protection advocate, and this is something that you're very passionate about.
Absolutely. It's always the David versus Goliath thing. These gigantic companies, these bill collectors, they're going after people who are already having trouble making ends meet. And what really is kicking somebody when they're down or rubbing salt in the wound is they are engaging in, it's so often that I see it, engaging in unlawful practices. They're threatening people with going to the credit agency, threatening to garnish wages the next day when there's no way that could possibly happen. So I'm very glad to have Jack Jernigan here to talk about rights, things that you can do yourself to protect yourself, some easy steps. Forms we'll provide on our website. It's going to be a great discussion.
It is going to be a great discussion, and we are not by any means saying that people should not pay their debts. They should pay their debts, but what we are saying is that you should not be harassed by these debt collectors. There are laws that protect you, and we're going to get into some of those.
Absolutely.
All right, coming up next, attorney Jack Jernigan joins the show to talk about debt collection. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Hello everybody and welcome back. We are talking about debt collection and your rights when it comes to dealing with the collectors on the other end of the phone. While there are federal laws that prohibit debt collectors from using abusive, unfair, or deceptive practices to collect, well, we know it still happens. Joining us today to talk about the law and your rights is attorney Jack Jernigan.
Jack has been practicing law for 3 decades in the areas of debt collection, consumer bankruptcy, and personal injury, and is a professor of business law at Tulane University. Jack, thanks so much for joining us today to talk about this very important topic that affects so many people.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Shauna. This is a wonderful show, and it'll be nice to get this information out here to people who are being harassed by debt collectors, because many people do not know their rights.
Yeah, and it's so amazing that there are laws out there that deal specifically with this, but I got to ask you, are you just shocked by how much of the harassment actually goes on and how bad it can actually get at times? Sadly,
I've seen it so much, I am no longer shocked. But it's so frequent, and the violations of the law are so common that it's great to have a show like this to get people's rights out there so they know what they can do.
Well, maybe what we could do just to sort of help get started in the conversation is let's define what debt collection is, define what the overview of the defense against unfair debt collectors is.
Okay. The Fair Debt Collection Practices Act is a national act, it's federal law, and it applies to debt collectors. Typically these are people who buy debts that are often over 3 months old. When the debt gets 3 months old, a credit card company will often sell it to a bill collector. And that's when the phone calls will really start ramping up to the debtors. And it applies to most debts that most individuals have. The only thing it really does not apply to are taxes and business debts, typically.
And we want to be very clear, you know, we understand that people have debts and we want you to pay your debts. I mean, you're obligated to pay your debts, but you can't be treated or mistreated if you're not paying those debts.
And let's talk about what mistreatment means. That debt collectors might be very rude, they might be harassing you, which is illegal. They might be calculating incorrectly how much they owe you, and guess what? They miscalculated in a way that's good for them and bad for you. So they want to collect too much. They want to add on fees and penalties. So describe for us some examples of those issues that the Debt Collection Act is protecting against.
And another thing, John, that they'll do is call you repeatedly. Phone call after phone call. Often I've seen 20, 30 phone calls in a day.
Wow.
So they cannot do that. They cannot lie to you, they cannot curse at you, they cannot misrepresent the amount of the debt like you talked about. And I've never seen it operate in the debtor's favor. If the debt is misrepresented, it's always too big.
Yeah, that's not a coincidence.
Yeah.
And they'll call you not just at home, but they'll even call you at your job.
They will call you at your job. That's a favorite tactic of theirs because it puts such pressure on you when their employer knows and your co-employees know about a debt.
Yeah.
And you can prevent that.
Yeah, and that's really what they're trying to do. They're trying to put the pressure on. We were talking earlier, and I was asking, are they trained to be mean and nasty? Are they? Explain to us the dynamic of the situation.
Well, sadly, they're often paid less than minimum wage and operate strictly on commission. And so there's a lot of pressure. There's a big board where they work. They're in a call center somewhere. There's hundreds of employees in cubicles. Everybody knows how much debt everybody's collecting, and every month they lay people off who do not collect enough debt. So they are under extreme pressure to collect a debt from you.
Mm-hmm. They're under pressure, and so they're pressuring you because this is money in their pocket, essentially.
Exactly.
And again, we want to say that if you have debts, you ought to pay them. You want to try and figure out how to pay them in a way that keeps all your bills and finances in order so you don't make things worse for yourself. But there's a gigantic population of people who are so abused by these debt collectors, credit card collectors, mortgage collectors, practically you name it. Debts. We'll talk about if we have time this episode, if not next episode. Old traffic fines, parking ticket fines. These people who do that, I like to quote Dave Ramsey, they're scum. I mean, how awful a person can you be to call somebody and threaten to ruin their lives? And you know you shouldn't be doing that. And is it just so you can meet your quota and just get a little higher paycheck? It's awful.
It is, and they don't care about your circumstances. Often you may have been laid off or have a family member who's ill. There's a whole range of circumstances why people don't pay their debts or can't pay their debts, especially in this economy. But they don't care about that. They're told not to care about. They need to pressure you. They need to get paid.
Yeah. What's the worst situation that you've come across?
Well, sadly, a bill collector got a 9-year-old son on the phone and said, "Daddy is going to jail if he doesn't pay his debt." Naturally, this was very upsetting to the entire family.
That's extreme even for a debt collector.
It is. It is very extreme. You don't see that much. And it terrified the entire family, and it was highly illegal.
Yeah, yeah. So he got a 9-year-old son on the line. So that leads me to my next question. Who can these debt collectors talk to, aside from the person who owes the debt? They can call neighbors, relatives. Who can they talk to?
They can and they do, but the law says it's very limited in what they can do. The law says they can only call them one time, and they cannot mention the debt that's owed. They can only call a relative or a friend to find out where the debtor is, the phone number, and where the debtor works, and that's it. They cannot call them repeatedly. They cannot certainly threaten the debtor via the relative or friend, and that's what they're limited to regarding those people.
We've talked a lot about what the debtors do and what they're entitled to do. Let's talk about the poor unfortunate son of a gun who's being hassled and harassed or believes they're being unfairly treated. What rights does the person who allegedly owes the money have?
This is a good topic, and they have rights, and they're very easy to enforce. All the debtor has to do is send a letter to the debt collection company saying, "Please do not contact me by phone, do not contact me at work." And once they receive that letter, if they're contacted by phone or at work, then they have violated the law.
And while you're talking about that, we're going to put up a sample of that letter up there because it's a form letter.
Well, that's a slightly different letter. The one there's a letter that says, "Please, I have a right to know. I have a right to require you to tell me how much I owe you. Give me the details." We can put that up on the screen, perhaps. It says, under the provisions of the 1977 Federal Fair Credit Reporting Act, I hereby request that your agency prove to me in writing the accuracy of the reporting on my account and under the terms of the Act. Succeeding court cases, you have 30 days to prove such accuracy. Actually, I think that is text regarding writing to a credit reporting agency, if I'm not mistaken. And all this is on our website. You don't have to try and write all this down real quick.
Right.
Go ahead.
You can write to the debt collector if you don't think you owe that debt and say, "Prove to me that I owe that debt," and they have to send you proof, such as a credit card bill
And that form letter is actually going to be on our website in connection with this show. So you'll be able to get forms you can use. So you can send and say, prove to me this debt.
And they have to do so.
But you mentioned sending a letter saying, don't contact me by phone, don't contact my family, don't contact me at work. We talked about this before taping the show. Send that certified. Certified return receipt. That way that letter doesn't get lost. There's no argument about whether or not the collection company got the letter, because you have that green card that says it was delivered. Obviously keep a copy for yourself and your own records.
Definitely. The law doesn't say you have to send it certified. Interestingly, you can actually request verbally, but if you want to prove later on that you have actually requested that they conform with the act, then certainly the way to do that is by certified mail. An ordinary letter will typically get lost.
Yeah.
They can deny receiving it, and same thing with a verbal request.
What
And
about
you have no way
emailing?
of proving it got delivered except for that return
Yeah, what
receipt.
about emailing or even faxing a letter? Good, or don't even go that route?
If you can get a fax confirmation, that will work. If you can get a fax number, sometimes a fax number is hard to get for from these debt collectors. They don't typically have them on their letterhead because they don't want you to have it.
They don't want you to, yeah.
And emailing, you can try it. If you get a return email from them acknowledging they received it, that will work too. The best way, the most certain way, is a certified letter, and that's easy to go to the post office and send. Just say, I need to send a certified letter, and they'll give you the forms. And I think, John, we may have you may put instructions via certified letter on the website.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to put the instructions on how, just the basic steps. I'll link to the U.S. Post Office, Postal Service on how to do it. It's straightforward. It's about a $6 and change to send that certified letter. It's money well invested, because when somebody gets a certified letter, if you get a certified letter, you get nervous. It's usually not good news.
Yeah.
When they get that certified letter, they know that you are documenting, and they're not going to be able to dispute that you asked for whatever you asked for.
And then they know that you understand your rights and you're serious.
Right.
Talk more about the harassment part, because certainly a debt collector, I mean, if a company is trying to collect a debt, they have a right to try to collect that debt. But when does it cross the line? When we say harassing, what are we talking about?
Another thing we're talking about that we haven't mentioned is the time they can call you. Under the Act, they can only call you during normal time, say between roughly 8 a.m. and 9 p.m. They cannot call you later than that or before that. Again, at work, they can't call you repeatedly at work, and if you ask them not to, they can't call you at work at all. And then a favorite tactic of theirs is repeated phone calls, just calling, and if you talk to them and hang up on them because they are angry with you or curse at you or rude, they'll call you right back and call you right back. They'll ring people's phones off the hook, and the elderly are particularly susceptible to this.
And you might even say, okay, I promise to pay you, but another collection call center from across the country may not have that memo, and they'll still call and harass you. It drives you insane.
They
That's
will.
part of what was in that case that we talked about in the intro. Well, actually, we'll talk about a case where I actually got a substantial award against a city mortgage company because they harassed, just like you're describing.
Yeah, and also, you can send a letter saying, please don't call me at work, but typically, or not typically, but often that collection agency will sell that debt to another agency. So then you're going to need to send another letter to that new agency to advise them that you're exercising your rights.
Okay, all right, we're going to have to take a quick break right here. Coming up next, we will get to your questions about debt collection. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.